welcome to new video. This is going to be something new, but today we'll be diving into why Socrates hated democracy, like the whole concept of democracy, and how he actually predicted the downfall of modern democracy. Now, first, before we get into the actual meat and potatoes of what I'm talking about, it's important to know first who Socrates actually was. Now, if you already know basic Greek history, you probably already know who Socrates is, and if you do and don't want me to if you don't want to hear me talk about what you already know, skip to this timestamp. I'll put it right there, wherever I put it in editing. But even if you do know who he is, I still really highly suggest you stay, because you could have learned something new. But to those who stayed, we will be discussing who Socrates was. Socrates was a man born in the wealthy and aristocratic Greek city-state of Athens, son of Socrates? Something like that. Socrates lived his early life as a stonemason and sculptor, which was his father's trade. Socrates did this for most of his early life before dedicating his entire life to philosophy. Most people don't know, but Socrates was also a war veteran in the Great Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta, and notably saving the life of the Athenian general Alcibiades, something like that, at the Battle of Potidæa. Socrates fought along the sides of his hoplite brothers with great bravery and valor, and because of that, it gave him a very good structure to propel his way through the messy halls of Greek philosophy and politics. It was very messy, especially in Athens. Athens was a very radical democracy, to those who don't know. But most who have encountered him, Socrates was... Oh wait, no, sorry, my bad. I went over a little bit. I'm reading off a script right now. Something worth noting is that Socrates never wrote down any of his lessons. Many people don't know that. It was the notes and words of his students where we get his teachings and wise words from. I forgot why he didn't write down any of his lessons. I just think, knowing who he was, I think he just didn't care to. And he probably already knew everyone else was writing about who he was. So, if I had to guess, it's probably that's why he didn't do any of his lessons. Obviously, take that with a grain of salt, because I'm not a actual historian. I just dabble. By most who have encountered him, Socrates was regarded as incredibly annoying, arrogant, and an intellectual threat. But the thing is, he acted like that on purpose. After a friend was told by the oracle at Delphi that no man was wiser than Socrates, Socrates set out to test the claim. He concluded that he was wise only because he recognized his own absolute ignorance. Instead of lecturing, he engaged citizens in public dialogue by asking strategic, probing questions. He exposed contradictions in their beliefs, forcing them to admit that they do not know what they claim to know. Now that whole spiel is over, let's dive into why he actually hated democracy. Some people think and say and get it misunderstood that he made democracy, but that's not really the case. He more used democracy as an example of why it's bad. He never really created democracy because he hated it. He really hated democracy. And also how he predicted the downfall of modern democracy. Alright. Socrates hated democracy because he believed that voting is a specialized skill that requires deep education and critical thinking, not an inherited right that belongs to everyone by birth. Which, might I add, education and critical thinking skills is increasingly becoming less and less in America. More than, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but over 20% of adults in America cannot read properly. That is around 43 million people that can legally vote and is in charge of our future generations. Let that sink in for a little bit. Over 43 million adults. That is people who can vote, people who can be in the army, people who are supposed to take political positions as leaders, and people who take up jobs that are meant to build our country. Those are the people that we are relying on, people who cannot read. And the thing is, it's not even their fault. They just led to believe that reading and actually taking time to look into something is just worthless because it's not interesting to them. But anyway, that's a topic for a different day. Socrates gives us a metaphor called the ship of state metaphor. Socrates asks, if you were heading out on a journey by sea, who would you want in charge of the ship? Just anyone? Like anyone at all. Anyone. Just random person you find on the street. Or a captain who is trained, educated, and experienced in navigation. The obvious answer is the trained captain. Socrates then applied this logic to politics. Running a city-state requires immense knowledge of economics, military strategy, ethics, and law. Excuse me. He argued that by allowing any regular citizen to vote or run for office regardless of their wisdom or education, democracy leaves the steering wheel of society in the hands of completely unqualified people. Socrates warned that democracy inevitably leads to the rise of demagogues, manipulative politicians who win power by telling voters what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar at all to what's happening in today's date? Politicians trying to win power by telling us what we want to hear instead of what we need to hear. Does that sound familiar at all? Because it should. If you're paying attention to recent geopolitics, it should sound very, very familiar. Imagine an election between a doctor and a candy store owner. The candy shop owner stands before the voters and say, "Look at this doctor. He hurts you. He gives you bitter medicine, cuts you open with knives, and tell you that you can't eat or drink whatever you want. I, on the other hand, will give you sweets, feasts, and pleasures." And the doctor can only respond by saying, "I cause you pain to cure your illnesses and save your lives." Socrates argued that the voters, uneducated and seeking immediate comfort, will always vote for the candy shop owner. Again, does this sound familiar? Does this sound familiar? I want you to think to yourselves, does this sound familiar with current geopolitics? Because voters are easily swayed by emotion, fear, and greed, doesn't matter how educated you are, every human is easily swayed by emotions, fear, and greed. My words have been tried and tested throughout years and centuries of history. Eons are too long. Eons of history proves my point that no matter how smart a group of people are, they will always be swayed by emotion, fear, and greed. Because it's in our blood. But because voters are easily swayed by emotions, fear, and greed, Socrates believed democracy frequently devolves into mob rule. In Athens, decisions were made by a direct majority vote of citizens present in the assembly. Socrates saw that an angry or panicked crowd could easily be manipulated into passing terrible, impulsive laws, starting unnecessary wars, or executing innocent people just because they were unpopular. I say again, does this also sound familiar? Does this sound familiar? Because it should. It really should sound familiar to you. But also, ironically, Socrates himself became the ultimate proof of his own theory. In 399 BCE, an Athenian democratic jury voted by simple majority to execute him, not because he committed a real crime, but because the crowd found his public questioning annoying and offensive. I say again, does this also sound familiar? Does this also sound familiar to current events happening right now, and also past events? Because it really should. It really should sound very familiar. In summary, democracy, if left unchecked, which it often will, always leads to corruption, which is why it must be nurtured and always watched, like pruning a sapling. If you leave a plant to itself, it'll waste its energy growing stems where it doesn't really need them, instead of focusing on growing and bearing fruit. When someone comes in and clips what it doesn't need so it can flourish into a beautiful tree, it can feed generations of people. When it's checked, and when it's balanced, and when it's pruned, when the rot is taken out, that is when democracy can actually flourish, and when it does actually work. That is why America originally had a republic, so it could actually have trained people to make the decisions of what their people they're representing actually want. That is the actual reason why we have representatives and not just actual people going in to Washington, D.C. and voting for themselves. The politicians we have in America are meant to represent us. And the decisions they make are based on what we want, not the other way around. But anyway, if you like this type of video, be sure to subscribe so I can make more of them, and so I know what video, and be sure to like so I know what videos you want to see more. You know, help me help you. I hope you learned something today, and be sure to share what you learned with your friends so we can get that 20% literacy rate in America down. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all later at a later time. Goodbye.